Imagine you're looking through a really high-powered telescope, right? Straight at the rings of Saturn.
Okay.
You're staring at this iconic, just beautiful natural phenomenon, cosmic dust, ice, all that. But then you spot an anomaly.
Like a weird rock or something?
No, not a rock. You see a machine. A 36,000 kilometer long machine, and it's actively manufacturing the rings.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's terrifying.
Right. You're not looking at a natural wonder anymore. You're looking at a terraforming project run by some intelligence that literally treats planets like we treat Lego sets.
It's just the ultimate paradigm-shifting image. I mean, it completely shatters our sense of scale and, our actual place in the universe.
Exactly. So, welcome to today's deep dive. If you are joining us right now, buckle up, because we have an absolute monster of a deep dive for you today.
We really do.
Our mission is to unpack this wildly eclectic, just incredibly dense stack of sources that you, the listener, actually sent our way.
And it starts out pretty grounded, right?
Yeah, it begins as this really fascinating scientific exploration of deep sea biology. Stuff right here on Earth. But I have to warn you, it very rapidly spirals into this colossal repository of reports. We're talking ancient anomalies, extraterrestrial encounters, fringe physics, and honestly, some of the most extreme human conditions imaginable.
We are basically charting the absolute edges of the unknown today, from the literal crushing depths of our oceans to the far reaches of space. And, into the darkest corners of human secrecy and state control.
Yeah, but before we take a single step further into this labyrinth, I need to make something incredibly clear to everyone listening.
Very important point here.
Right. This deep dive contains highly controversial, politically charged, and fringe claims, especially regarding alleged military actions, sweeping government cover-ups, and global geopolitics.
Yeah, and alternative history, too.
Exactly. So my co-hosts and I are strictly and impartially reporting on the fascinating, mind-bending ideas contained within this specific source material. We are not endorsing any of these viewpoints. We are not taking sides. Right. We're just the guides.
Exactly. We're just mapping out this wild terrain so you can see the whole picture.
That is such a vital distinction to keep in mind. Our goal here isn't to stamp a true or false label on every single sentence in these documents.
Wow.
Our goal is to examine the data points, ask why these narratives even exist in the first place, and explore the science they reference. We want to understand the architecture of these claims, no matter how surreal they get.
I love that. The architecture of the claims. All right, let's jump in. And I mean that literally.
Oh, yeah.
Down we go. We're starting our journey right here at home, diving straight down into the literal abyss, the biological Twilight Zone.
It's fascinating stuff.
It is. The sources detail the absolutely extreme conditions of the deep sea. So we're talking about mapping life, starting at 2,400 meters down, plunging to 8,000 meters, and eventually hitting a staggering 12,000 meter limit, which is the absolute deepest hole referenced in our materials. And to really grasp what's happening biologically down there, we have to understand the physics of those depths. I mean, at 8,000 meters, the pressure isn't just heavy.
Right.
It is fundamentally destructive to standard biology. You're dealing with roughly 800 times the normal atmospheric pressure that you feel just standing at sea level.
800 times. Okay, what does that actually physically do to a body?
Well, if you took a standard surface-dwelling organism, say a human, and exposed them to that pressure, the air spaces inside the body would compress instantly.
Just crush them.
Yeah, lungs would crush down to the size of a pair of apples. But the real issue, the really crazy part, is at the cellular level.
Wait, the cells get crushed too.
Exactly. At 800 atmospheres, the water molecules are squeezed so tightly together that the fundamental chemical reactions required for life they start to fail.
Oh, wow.
Proteins, which are, these complex folded chains of amino acids that do all the actual work in our cells, they literally begin to unfold and collapse under the physical force.
And the temperatures down there are what? Hovering just a tiny fraction above absolute freezing?
Exactly. So on top of the crushing pressure and the freezing cold, you have the total absence of sunlight.
Right, pitch black.
And without sunlight, you have no photosynthesis. No photosynthesis means no plants, no phytoplankton. So the foundational base of the standard food web simply does not exist. It's a severe, almost total scarcity of calories.
It's an alien world.
Truly.
And the biology totally reflects that. The sources talk about this phenomenon called deep sea gigantism. The text mentions creatures down there that look like oversized bugs. like literal glitches in reality, but they're massive.
Yeah, the size thing is so weird.
It is, because my immediate thought is, if there is no food, how on earth do you get giants? Wouldn't a starving environment create tiny, emaciated little creatures?
You'd think so. It's totally counterintuitive. Yeah. But it comes down to this really fascinating intersection of metabolism and environmental adaptation. It's closely related to what biologists call Bergmann's rule, mixed with some deep-sea specific evolutionary pressures.
Okay, break that down for me. How does Bergmann's rule work down there?
So in freezing temperatures, metabolic rates just plummet. The chemical engines of the body run in ultra-low gear.
Okay.
And because the metabolism is so slow, cell sizes can actually afford to increase, and lifespans extend dramatically. These creatures move slowly, they grow slowly, and they live a very long time.
But why get big in the first place?
Because when a food source does finally arrive, say, a massive whale carcass sinking from the surface, which biologists call a whale fall, a larger body mass can ingest and store vastly more energy.
Oh, I see.
A giant creature can gorge itself and then survive on those stored lipids for months, maybe even years, before needing to eat again.
So they end up being these massive, slow-moving biological tanks.
Exactly. Perfectly optimized for a world of extreme famine interrupted by brief moments of absolute feast.
That makes so much sense. They're basically giant batteries storing energy for the long, dark winter.
That's a great way to put it.
But some of these creatures just completely defy any logic I can wrap my head around. The text highlights a completely unknown species of snailfish.
Oh yeah, the snailfish.
Found at a staggering 8,336 meters deep. Now, you just said proteins collapse at that pressure. How are its proteins not just folding in on themselves like you described?
That is the absolute magic of deep-sea biochemistry. Creatures like that snailfish have evolved high concentrations of a chemical called TMAO. That's trimethylamine N oxide.
PMAO. Okay, what does that do?
It acts as a structural support beam at the microscopic level. It binds to the water molecules in the proteins, essentially acting like a pressure-resistant gel.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it prevents the proteins from folding in on themselves. The deeper a fish lives, the higher the concentration of TMAO in its tissue. It's basically a chemical force field against the crushing weight of the ocean.
That is brilliant. Nature just invents an internal pressure suit.
Pretty much.
And then the sources get into giant squids, noting that the deeper they go, the weirder and more gelatinous their biology gets. But the one that really stopped me in my tracks in this document was the Tully monster.
Oh, Tully monster.
Yeah, source literally describes this as a creature so inexplicable it silences scientists.
It really does. The Tully monster is one of paleontology's greatest headaches. When scientists look at its fossil record, it just breaks all standard taxonomy. It's a biological Frankenstein.
Describe what this thing looks like, because the text makes it sound like a bad drawing by a 5-year-old.
It's so weird. It looks like a soft-bodied torpedo. But instead of a normal face, it has this long, rigid, trunk-like appendage extending from the front, which ends in a claw-like mouth filled with teeth.
Okay, terrifying.
And then sticking straight out horizontally from the middle of its body, it has this stiff bar with an eyeball on each end.
Wait, like a hammerhead shark?
Sort of, but just a rigid bar right through the middle of the body. It doesn't neatly fit into the category of vertebrate or invertebrate.
How is that possible?
Well, it has characteristics that suggest a rudimentary backbone, a notochord, but the rest of its anatomy suggests a slug or some weird arthropod. Decades after its discovery, the scientific community is still fiercely debating what branch of the tree of life it even belongs on.
It's as if nature was aggressively experimenting with a completely different set of biological blueprints and then just threw them in the trash.
Exactly. Just scrap the whole project.
It's so bizarre, and the survival tactics in the zone are brutal. The sources detail these 2,400-meter deep food fights, just swarms of scavengers viciously tearing apart whatever falls from the surface.
Yeah, the whale falls get crazy.
And then it talks about the anglerfish. Now, we all know the anglerfish. The terrifying jaw, the little glowing light bulb dangling in front of its face. But the text highlights its reproductive methods, which are wildly extreme.
The parasitic mating of the anglerfish is a masterpiece of extreme adaptation. I mean, think about the logistics. You're a tiny creature in a pitch-black abyss that covers millions of cubic miles. Finding a meal is hard enough. Finding another member of your exact species, who also happens to be the opposite sex, at the exact right time for reproduction. I mean, the mathematical odds are practically zero.
It's like trying to find a specific grain of sand in a dark football stadium?
Exactly. So evolution provided this radical solution. When a tiny free-swimming male anglerfish, who, by the way, lacks the glowing lure and is basically just a swimming nose looking for pheromones.
A swimming nose, I love that.
Right. When he finally encounters a giant female, he bites onto her side. And he doesn't let go.
Never.
Never. He releases an enzyme that dissolves the skin of his mouth and her body.
Yeah.
And their bloodstreams physically fuse together.
Wait, hold on. If I get an organ transplant, I have to take immunosuppressant drugs for the rest of my life so my body doesn't reject the foreign tissue.
Yeah.
How does the female anglerfish's immune system just allow another fish to meld into her side without attacking it as a massive infection?
That is a phenomenal question, and scientists only recently figured this out. It turns out these species of anglerfish have practically discarded their acquired immune system.
They just got rid of it.
Yeah. They lack the key genes responsible for creating T cells and B cells, and they don't produce standard antibodies. They rely almost entirely on innate primitive immune response.
Wow.
They gave up the ability to fight off complex diseases just so they could successfully merge with a mate.
That is dedication to the species.
It really is. Because once he fuses, the male's internal organs, his eyes, his fins, his digestive tract, all completely degenerate and wither away.
Oh, gross.
He becomes nothing more than a permanent, attached reproductive organ for the female. He just draws nutrients directly from her blood and provides sperm whenever she's ready to spawn. It's extreme, yes, but it perfectly solves the logistical nightmare of finding a mate in an endless void.
Okay, but here is where I really need you to explain something, because the sources pose this massive paradox about this environment.
Oh, the bioluminescence.
Yes. It states that up to 90% of creatures in the Twilight Zone emit light. They're bioluminescent. Now, we just established that there is zero food, and there are giant hungry monsters lurking in the pitch black.
Right.
Isn't glowing literally painting a target on your back? I mean, it feels like wandering into a dark forest full of starving wolves and strapping a strobe light to your head.
It absolutely does from a surface dweller's perspective. Our instinct is that the best defense in the dark is to stay dark. But if we examine the actual physics of light in the Twilight Zone, bioluminescence is not a vulnerability. It's a highly sophisticated multi-tool.
Okay, how so?
First, consider the concept of counter-illumination.
What does that mean?
So in the upper layers of the Twilight Zone, there's still a faint, almost imperceptible trickle of sunlight filtering down from the surface.
Okay.
If you're a fish swimming in that zone, a predator lurking beneath you can look up and see your dark silhouette perfectly contrasted against that faint blue downwelling light. You're a shadow, and shadows get eaten.
So they glow to hide?
Yes. Many creatures have light-emitting organs, called photophores, arranged strictly on their bellies. They can actually adjust the intensity and the exact wavelength of the blue light they emit to perfectly match the sunlight trickling down from above.
That's insane.
To a predator looking up, the fish's shadow is completely erased. It blends perfectly with the background light. It is an active biological cloaking device.
That is incredible. They are erasing their own silhouettes. What else did they use it for?
Then you have what marine biologists call the burglar alarm effect.
Burglar alarm.
Yeah. Let's say you're a small, glowing jellyfish, and a medium-sized squid grabs you. You don't have claws or teeth to fight back. Instead, you trigger a brilliant, pulsating flash of light, like a biological strobe.
To blind the squid?
No, to wrap the squid out.
Oh.
The flash is designed to attract an even larger predator, like a massive deep-sea fish, from miles away. The giant predator swims over, sees the illuminated squid holding you, and eats the squid. And then the jellyfish just quietly floats away in the chaos. You are essentially setting off a car alarm in a bad neighborhood, hoping the police, or in this case, a bigger, hungrier monster, show up to deal with your attacker.
That is so devious. It's an ecosystem where light is a weapon, a shield, and a language. But before we leave the deep sea, I have to point something out from our source material that just had me laughing out loud.
Let me guess. The advertisement.
Yes. I'm reading through this incredibly dense text about the existential horror of pitch black abyss monsters. And right in the middle, inserted into the text, is a sponsored ad for a robot vacuum cleaner.
Of course.
The Roborock P20 Max is boasting about 35,000 Pascal suction power and a zero tangling brush. I just lost it. We're talking about alien environments, and the algorithm is just worried about my living room rug.
Targeted advertising truly knows no depths. It is a jarring transition, to say the least.
It's just so absurdly human. We are peering into this unfathomable void, and simultaneously we are obsessing over automated cleaning tech. But In a weird way, that desire to use technology to control our environment, to reverse entropy and clean things up, is a perfect bridge into the next massive section of our sources.
Oh, absolutely.
Because if the deep ocean hides living relics of the deep past, the text suggests that human technology is about to rip the past straight into the present.
You're talking about the de-extinction efforts.
Exactly. The text introduces us to Colossal Biosciences, which is billed as the world's first anti-extinction company. And they're just theorizing. They have specific, wildly ambitious, and heavily funded plans to resurrect the dire wolf, the woolly mammoth, the saber-toothed tiger, and the dodo bird.
This is a phenomenal intersection of ancient biology and cutting-edge genetic engineering. The concept of de-extinction is moving so rapidly from science fiction to practical laboratory science.
But the sources make a very specific distinction here. They note that resurrecting the mammoth is one thing, but resurrecting the dodo bird is considered vastly more complex. Now, why is a giant prehistoric elephant easier to bring back than a flightless pigeon?
It all comes down to the fundamental mechanics of mammalian versus avian reproduction.
Okay, walk me through it.
Let's look at the mammoths first. For a mammal, the process, while immensely difficult, follows a logical progression we already understand from cloning. You find well-preserved mammoth DNA in the permafrost. You map the genome.
Right.
Then you take the living cells of its closest modern relative, the Asian elephant, and you use CRISPR gene editing tools to splice those mammoth traits. The hair, the cold-adapted blood, the fat layers right into the elephant genome. Then you create an embryo.
And then you just implant it, right?
Exactly. You implant that engineered embryo into the uterus of a female Asian elephant acting as a surrogate mother. She carries it to term and gives birth to a mammoth-elephant hybrid.
Okay, so why doesn't that work for the dodo? You find dodo DNA, edit a pigeon, and implant it.
Because birds lay eggs.
Right.
You can't just perform in vitro fertilization and implant an embryo into a surrogate bird's uterus. The avian reproductive tract wraps the embryo in a yolk, coats it in albumin, and encases it in a hard calcium shell before it leaves the body.
Wow, I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, you cannot physically access the developing embryo in a non-destructive way. So the genetic engineering approach has to be entirely different.
How do you do it then, if you can't get to the embryo?
You have to work at the cellular level during the very early stages of embryonic development. Scientists extract what are called primordial germ cells, the cells that will eventually become sperm and eggs from a developing pigeon embryo.
Okay.
They edit the DNA of those germ cells to carry the dodo traits. Then, they inject those edited cells back into another developing pigeon embryo while it's still forming inside the egg.
Wait, so the pigeon that hatches isn't the dodo?
No, the pigeon that hatches looks like a normal pigeon, but its reproductive organs are composed of the edited dodo cells.
That is wild.
So when that pigeon grows up and mates with another similarly engineered pigeon, they produce sperm and eggs carrying the dodo genome. Their offspring will be the dodo. It requires a level of microbiological engineering that is several magnitudes more complex than mammalian cloning.
That is mind-bending. The pigeon basically acts as a biological 3D printer for a completely different species.
That's a great analogy.
So we are literally trying to rewrite the timeline of extinction. But the text doesn't stop at resurrecting animals. It takes a massive leap and claims we might need to resurrect our entire understanding of human history itself.
Yes. The sources delve heavily into alternative archaeology and alternative history. It outlines claims that humanity, as we understand it, our current civilization starting roughly 6,000 years ago in Mesopotamia, might not be the first advanced civilization to exist on Earth.
It points to a very specific climate event, a period of rapid global warming that occurred 55 million years ago.
BPT.
Right. The text suggests this was caused by excessive CO2 emissions that wiped out a previous advanced era 55 million years ago. That's the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, right?
Correct. The PTM is a well-documented event in the geological record. Around 55 million years ago, global temperature spiked dramatically, rising by 5 to 8 degrees Celsius in a relatively short geological time frame. And the carbon isotope record shows a massive sudden injection of carbon into the atmosphere and oceans.
But mainstream science says that was volcanoes, right?
Mainstream geology attributes it to massive volcanic activity in the North Atlantic, or the sudden thawing of methane clathrates on the ocean floor. But the fringe claim in the text reinterprets that data. It leans on a thought experiment that scientists themselves have proposed, often called the Silurian hypothesis.
Which asks what?
The question is If an industrial civilization existed 55 million years ago and they burned fossil fuels just like we do, what would their footprint look like today?
Would we find their buildings, their plastic?
No. After 55 million years of tectonic subduction, glaciation, and erosion, every physical trace of a civilization, every skyscraper, every bridge, every plastic bottle would be ground into dust and recycled by the Earth's crust.
Everything?
Everything. The only surviving signature would be a sudden, anomalous spike in carbon isotopes in the sedimentary rock layers. And that is exactly what the PTM is. Now, mainstream science does not believe the PTM was caused by an ancient lizard civilization driving SUVs.
Right.
But the text uses that real geological data to argue that the timeline of intelligence on Earth is cyclical, not linear.
That is a fascinating way to twist real data. And the sources bring this cyclical idea much closer to home, too. It jumps forward to claims of an Ice Age civilization.
This is where it gets incredibly wild.
It claims that long before the ancient Sumerians or Egyptians, there was a global seafaring civilization that possessed advanced star maps, incredible megalith building skills, and ocean navigation before being completely erased by a natural disaster, like a comet impact or massive flooding at the end of the last Ice Age.
This is a cornerstone of alternative archaeology. It's popularized by authors who argue that sites like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, which dates back over 11,000 years, prove that hunter-gatherers were capable of massive, organized, megalithic architecture millennia before the invention of agriculture.
But the text gets even more specific and controversial. It mentions recent Italian archaeological radar discoveries right at the Giza Plateau in Egypt, home of the Great Pyramids. It says they used ground-penetrating radar and detected mysterious, perfectly geometric cubes and giant, complex tunnels hidden deep under the sand.
Ground-penetrating radar, or GPR, is a fantastic tool, but it is notoriously difficult to interpret, especially in a place like Giza.
Why is that?
Well, GPR works by pulsing electromagnetic waves into the ground and measuring the signal that bounces back. It detects changes in the dielectric permittivity of the materials below.
So it spots where solid rock turns into an empty tunnel.
Theoretically, yes, but it also bounces off variations in moisture, pockets of loose sand, natural fault lines, and different densities of bedrock.
Oh, I see.
In a limestone plateau riddled with natural karst caves and fissures, GPR will return thousands of anomalies. The leap happens when those blurry radar returns are instantly interpreted as perfectly geometric cubes or ancient subway systems without physical excavation to verify it. The Giza Plateau is a magnet for these claims because the visible architecture is already so mind-boggling that people assume there must be more hidden beneath.
But the text goes way beyond radar anomalies. It explicitly claims there are giant shafts, 648 meters deep, located right under the pyramids, leading down to a massive ancient city 2 kilometers underground.
Okay, let's look at the mechanics of that claim. A vertical shaft 648 meters deep is deeper than the One World Trade Center is tall.
That's massive.
To sink a shaft of that magnitude through solid limestone bedrock would require monumental drilling technology. But the real issue is the 2-kilometer deep subterranean city.
What's the problem there? Like heat?
Heat, pressure, and water. At 2 kilometers deep, the lithostatic pressure, the weight of the rock above you is immense. You need highly advanced engineering to prevent the caverns from collapsing. You have to actively pump fresh air down, which requires massive continuous energy.
Right, people need to breathe.
And most importantly, the water table. The Giza Plateau is right next to the Nile River. The water table is relatively shallow. If you dig 2 kilometers down, you're going to hit massive aquifers.
It would just fill up.
The entire city would be flooded almost instantly unless they possessed industrial-scale water displacement pumps running non-stop for millennia. The engineering required vastly exceeds what we can easily do today, let alone in antiquity.
It's an impossible claim. But speaking of defying engineering, the sources bring up a much more recent mystery to back up the idea of lost ancient tech. Coral Castle in Florida.
Oh, Ed Leedskalnin.
Yes. Built by one man in the early 20th century. The text notes he was a slight, terminally ill man, yet he single-handedly quarried, moved, and sculpted massive coral blocks, some weighing over 15 tons. And the source claims he used what it calls simple stone manipulation.
Coral Castle is a fantastic historical footnote, and it's a real place you can visit. Leedskalnin was very secretive. He mostly worked at night, and he didn't allow anyone to watch him build.
Which just fuels the mystery.
Because no one saw him do it, a massive mythology grew around him. The fringe theory highlighted in your text suggests he rediscovered the lost acoustic levitation or anti-gravity techniques used by the Ice Age pyramid builders.
How did he actually do it?
The mainstream verifiable explanation is much more grounded, but honestly just as impressive. Teenagers once spied on him and reported seeing him using wooden tripods. He used the principles of physics levers, pulleys, and block and tackle systems.
Block and tackle?
Yeah, a block and tackle system uses a series of ropes and pulleys to multiply mechanical advantage. If you set it up correctly, a 100-pound man can lift a 10,000-pound stone.
That's amazing.
He also precisely balanced the stones on their center of gravity. He carved a 9-ton revolving door that was so perfectly balanced on an automobile bearing that a child could push it open with one finger. It's a testament to solitary human ingenuity, but the text elevates it to supernatural ancient technology.
It's incredible how we look at genius and immediately assume it must be magic.
Right.
And that perfectly sets up the next layer of the text. It moves from giant stones to microscopic biology. It brings genetics into the mix. The text discusses ancient Sumerian records, specifically claiming they merge with modern genetics to reveal 3 hidden human secrets.
Let's hear them.
The language gene, a youth-reversing gene, and chromosome fusion. It implies we were genetically tampered with by external architects.
This is where alternative history attempts to borrow the credibility of modern biology. The language gene they are referring to is likely FOXP2, a real gene associated with speech and language development in humans.
And what about the chromosome fusion? Because that's a very specific biological claim.
It is, and it is based on a profound, real biological fact. Humans have 46 chromosomes, 23 pairs. All the other great apes, chimpanzees, gorillas, orangutans, they have 48 chromosomes. 24 pairs.
Right.
If we share a common ancestor, where did the extra pair go?
Did we lose them like an evolutionary accident?
No, we didn't lose the genetic information. 2 of the chromosomes fused together. Human chromosome 2 is a massive chromosome that is essentially 2 ancestral ape chromosomes welded end to end.
How do they know that?
We know this because of the mechanical structure of a chromosome. Imagine a chromosome like a shoelace. At the ends, you have telomeres, which are like the plastic aglets that keep the shoelace from fraying. And in the middle, you have a centromere.
Right, the knot in the middle.
Exactly. When geneticists look at human chromosome 2, they don't just see the normal telomeres at the ends. Whereas smack in the middle of the chromosome, they find the remnants of telomeres and 2 centromeres.
Oh, wow.
It is physical, structural proof that 2 separate shoelaces were tied together. Mainstream science understands this as a natural, albeit rare, mutation that occurred millions of years ago in our hominid ancestors, which became a defining genetic marker of the human lineage.
But the text says this wasn't an accident.
Right. The fringe narrative takes that incredible biological anomaly and applies intent to it. It argues that a natural fusion is too statistically improbable to explain our rapid leap in intelligence.
Yeah.
Therefore, they claim, the Sumerian gods, the Anunnaki, or whatever external architects you prefer, must have intentionally spliced those chromosomes together in a laboratory to upgrade a primate into a worker species.
Okay, let's take a breath and really look at this. We have 648-meter underground cities, one-man megalith builders lifting 15-ton stones, and claims that our literal DNA was engineered by cosmic architects.
That's a lot.
It is like we are trying to put together a massive jigsaw puzzle of human history, but half the pieces are from completely different sci-fi box. Why are these narratives so intensely compelling to so many people? Why do we want to believe someone else built the pyramids or spliced our DNA?
I think it comes down to a deep, almost instinctual human discomfort with chaos and slow time. Think about the last time you saw a piece of technology you completely didn't understand. Our instinct is to assume it's magic or alien.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The sources suggest humanity has been doing that since the dawn of time. When we look back at the explosive leaps in our own evolution, the sudden emergence of complex language, the anomalous fusion of chromosome 2, or the leap from hunter-gatherers to megalithic architects, it creates a cognitive gap.
And we don't like gaps. We like neat explanations.
Precisely. The reality of evolution and human progress is that it is messy. It involves thousands of years of trial and error, random genetic mutations, brutal environmental pressures, and countless forgotten generations slowly figuring things out.
Not a great story.
No, but a narrative that says "We were engineered by advanced gods who handed us the blueprints for civilization," is incredibly clean. It fills the gap with purpose. It is a modern mythology that allows us to feel connected to a grander engineered universe rather than accepting the slow, random, and often brutal process of natural human struggle.
It makes us the protagonist of a cosmic story rather than just a smart ape that got lucky.
Very well said.
But the sources suggest those cosmic architects didn't just tinker with us in the ancient past and leave. They are apparently still here. And this leads us directly into the most massive, overwhelming portion of our sources. The avalanche of data regarding modern and historical extraterrestrial phenomena, UAPs.
The sheer volume of the UAP data provided in the text is staggering. What really stands out is how aggressively the text attempts to reframe the timeline of the phenomenon.
Right. It totally dismantles the pop culture idea that UFOs are just a modern American obsession that started with Roswell in 1947. The text outlines ancient Chinese records, spanning from Emperor Yao all the way to the Ming and Qing dynasties. They describe sightings of what they called bright pearls and fairy rafts hovering in the sky.
Fairy rafts?
Yeah. And then there is a highly specific reference to an 80-year-old Chinese newspaper reporting a massive UFO fleet over multiple locations in China. The language in the translation is incredible. It talks about Martian visitors, blood pillar black spheres, dimensional rifts, and hand-pulled flying saucers.
By contextualizing the phenomenon with non-Western historical accounts, the sources are arguing that this is a persistent global part of the human environment. It suggests that humans have always seen these anomalies, but we interpret them through the lens of our current cultural technology.
So it changes depending on the era.
Yeah. To a Ming Dynasty farmer, a glowing orb is a bright pearl. To a 1940s American pilot, it's a flying saucer. The phenomenon remains constant, only the vocabulary changes.
But the text definitely leans heavily into the modern era, specifically crash retrievals and military encounters, and it fires them off in rapid succession. We have the 1948 Aztec incident, where allegedly an entirely undamaged saucer was recovered by the U.S. military in New Mexico.
Right.
Then the 1953 Kingman event, which sounds exactly like a sci-fi movie. The text claims 6 saucers were engaged in an aerial dogfight, with one crashing in the desert.
It expands significantly beyond the American Southwest, too.
Yes, the 1962 South Pacific Atoll incident. The claim here is wild. A glowing, carrier-sized UFO was allegedly shot down by a nuclear bomb. Now, from a purely tactical standpoint, why on earth would the military shoot a nuclear weapon at an unidentified craft?
To understand that claim, we have to look at the verifiable history of 1962. That was the era of high-altitude atmospheric nuclear testing by the United States, specifically operations like Fishbowl and Starfish Prime in the Pacific Ocean.
Okay, I've heard of Starfish Prime.
The military was detonating nuclear warheads in the upper atmosphere and lower space to study the effects of the electromagnetic pulse, or EMP. The Starfish Prime detonation was so powerful it blew out streetlights in Hawaii, 1,000 miles away.
So the military was just running science experiments with nukes in space.
Exactly. But the fringe narrative in your text weaves those real-world nuclear tests into a covert intergalactic war.
Oh, man.
The theory suggests that the military realized nuclear EMPs could disrupt the anti-gravity propulsion systems of these UFOs. So the text claims the high-altitude tests weren't just science experiments. They were active, offensive strikes designed to knock massive alien craft out of the sky. It takes a verifiable, highly classified historical event and applies a profound hidden motive to it.
That is a brilliant piece of speculative fiction.
Yeah.
Or terrifying reality, depending on how you look at it. The text keeps going. It mentions a 1997 Peru jungle crash, describing an egg-shaped craft protected by a colorful force field where investigators found a mysterious liquid.
Yeah, that one is strange.
And we have to talk about Japan Airlines Flight 1628 in 1986. A commercial cargo flight followed by a giant mothership. The text claims the radar data was hidden by the CIA for 32 years.
JAL 1628 is one of the most famous and highly documented aviation UAP encounters. The pilot, Captain Torochi, reported 2 small glowing objects pacing his Boeing 747 over Alaska, followed by a massive walnut-shaped mothership.
Wait, a walnut-shaped ship?
Yeah, and he said it was twice the size of an aircraft carrier.
Did the radar actually see it, or was the pilot just hallucinating?
That is what makes the case so enduring. Both the military radar at Elmendorf Air Force Base and the civilian FAA radar tracked an anomalous primary radar return near the JAL flight. John Callahan, who was the FAA Division Chief of Accidents and Investigations at the time, later publicly came forward.
What did you say?
He claimed he briefed President Reagan's scientific staff and the CIA on the incident, and that the CIA explicitly confiscated the radar data and told him the event never happened. So the text is anchoring its grander claims in real, documented testimonies of government obfuscation.
And it bridges this right up to the present day, mentioning recent congressional UAP hearings and alleged footage of a UAP getting hit by a missile and just continuing to fly as if nothing happened.
Unbothered.
Yeah. But what is really fascinating is how the text rapidly escalates the scale. We go from localized crashes in the desert to phenomena that defy conventional physics, and then the text just launches into astronomical cosmic anomalies.
The megastructures.
Yeah.
We are moving from studying insects in a jar to looking at the architects of the universe.
Exactly. The text brings up the 3-Aeolus interstellar object. It classifies it as an Avi-Loeb anomaly level 4, noting it has an anti-tail and was specifically hugging Jupiter's Hill sphere. Bring that down because there is a lot of astrophysics jargon there.
Avi-Loeb is a very real, highly respected, and controversial Harvard astrophysicist. He is most famous for arguing that the interstellar object Oumuamua, which passed through our solar system in 2017, exhibited anomalous acceleration that might be the result of artificial alien technology, like a light sail.
Okay, I remember that on the news.
The text applies this logic to another object, 3-Aeolus. Now, in mainstream astronomy, an anti-tail on a comet is just an optical illusion. As Earth passes through the comet's orbital plane, the heavier dust particles trailing behind the comet catch the sunlight, making it look like the comet has a spike pointing toward the sun instead of away from it.
But the text is framing it as an artificial exhaust plume.
Yes, and the detail about hugging Jupiter's Hill sphere is crucial. The Hill sphere is a region around a planet where its own gravity dominates the gravity of the sun. For a satellite to stay in orbit, it must remain within the Hill sphere.
Okay.
Jupiter's gravity is immense. Normally, if a rogue rock enters Jupiter's gravitational influence, it either gets sucked in and destroyed like the Shoemaker-Levy 9 comet, or it gets violently slingshotted out into deep space.
So for an object to just hug the edge of it,
It implies intelligent trajectory control. It suggests the object is actively using thrust to maintain an incredibly precise artificial orbit, perhaps using Jupiter's immense magnetic field to recharge its systems, rather than just tumbling randomly through the void.
and if you thought that was big, the sources go even bigger. The text explicitly claims there is a 36,200-kilometer giant alien ship manufacturing Saturn's rings right now.
Yeah, that's the one we started the show with.
It classifies this as a level 3 civilization terraforming project. And it mentions a Dyson sphere discovered 1,000 light years away, surrounding not one, but 7 stars.
We are firmly in the territory of the Kardashev scale here.
The Kardashev scale.
Yeah, it's a theoretical method of measuring a civilization's level of technological advancement based on the amount of energy they can harness. A Type 1 civilization harnesses all the energy of its home planet. A Type 2 harnesses all the energy of its star, typically by building a Dyson sphere. That's a megastructure that completely encloses the star to capture all its solar output.
And a Type 3.
A Type 3 civilization can harness the energy of an entire galaxy. Engineering the rings of Saturn or building a multi-star Dyson sphere requires the manipulation of mass and energy on a scale that would look to us completely indistinguishable from the acts of a god.
Okay, here's where I have to throw the brakes on and ask a very practical, almost cynical question.
Go for it.
The text presents all these massive reality-bending claims. Giant ships, force fields, dogfights over the desert. But we live in an era where literally everyone has a high-definition smartphone in their pocket.
Sure.
If a 36,000-kilometer ship is making Saturn's rings and these craft are flying all over our atmosphere, why are UFO photos still notoriously frustratingly blurry? Is it human error? Are our phone cameras actually just bad at this? Or is it something about the phenomenon itself that refuses to be photographed?
It is the ultimate skeptical question, and it is entirely valid. The blur is the punchline of every UFO joke. But if we look at the explanations provided within the theoretical framework of these fringe sources, the blur is actually a physical necessity. It's a combination of civilian optics limitations and advanced physics.
Let's start with the optics. My phone takes great pictures of my dog. Why can't it take a picture of a saucer?
Because your phone's camera is engineered with a wide-angle lens specifically designed for close-up, low-light environments. Taking pictures of your friends across a dinner table, it is not an optical telescope.
Right.
When you see something anomalous miles away in the sky and you try to zoom in with your phone, you aren't actually using optical zoom. You are using digital zoom. You are just taking the raw pixels in the center of the image and artificially stretching them.
Right, so it just turns into a blocky mosaic.
Exactly. But the sources go much further than just blaming the camera. They point to the alleged propulsion systems of these craft. The text specifically mentions the TR-3B, describing it as a magnetic fluid anti-gravity craft.
Anti-gravity.
Yeah, the operating theory behind anti-gravity propulsion, whether it is alien or a reverse-engineered human black project, is that it requires the generation of immensely powerful electromagnetic or gravitational fields.
How does that cause blur?
Think about driving down a hot asphalt highway in the summer. You look off into the distance, and the cars ahead of you look wavy and distorted, right?
Yeah, the heat waves.
That happens because the intense heat is changing the density of the air, which bends the light waves traveling through it. Now magnify that concept by 1,000,000. If a craft is enveloped in a high-energy gravitational envelope, it is literally warping the space-time around it.
Wow.
It is bending the light. The light bouncing off the hull of the ship simply isn't traveling in a straight line to your camera lens. The camera is functioning perfectly. Reality is what's physically distorted.
The text also mentions a really weird specific detail. It talks about pure white, low-temperature rubber duck UFOs that defy physics.
Yes, the rubber duck UAP is a famous leaked piece of thermal footage. If a craft operates at absolute zero or uses exotic metamaterials that absorb radar and ambient light, it won't reflect a sharp image. On a thermal camera, it might appear as an anomalous blur or terrifyingly cold void moving at Mach 10 rather than a sharp metallic object. The argument the sources are making is that the blur is actually the proof of the advanced physics.
That is a wild concept. The camera is working fine, reality is what's broken, which actually serves as a perfect conceptual bridge into the final and, frankly, the darkest section of our sources.
Yeah, this part gets heavy.
Because if physics and reality can be manipulated, what happens when that manipulation is turned inward on humanity? We've explored the extreme biology of the deep sea and the extreme physics of deep space. Now, the sources pull us into the darkest frontier. Extreme human realities, secret technologies, and the manipulation of the mind itself.
This section of the text is incredibly potent because it doesn't just float in the clouds with aliens. It violently grounds these high-concept sci-fi theories in very gritty, documented earthly miseries. It creates a spectrum of control.
It really does. It anchors the conversation in jarring extremes to show the duality of our reality. The sources describe the terrifying mega-prisons of El Salvador, specifically detailing how thousands of MS-13 and 18th Street gang members are locked up in these massive facilities with absolute zero privacy. It describes an environment of total physical domination.
It is the modern realization of the panopticon. Total surveillance, stripping away every ounce of human autonomy. It represents the ultimate physical manifestation of state power over the individual body.
And then the text moves geographically to North Korea. It details the harrowing escapes from the North Korean gulags. It specifically mentions the horrific reality that individuals, like the defector Park Yeon-mi, often escape one nightmare only to fall directly into human trafficking networks just trying to survive.
It's tragic.
It notes the mind-boggling fact that citizens can receive a 15-year sentence in a brutal labor camp just for the crime of watching a smuggled South Korean soap opera.
Yeah.
And then, contrasting that absolute deprivation, it points to Dubai, this glittering, ultra-modern city of unimaginable wealth, which the text claims is secretly transitioning into a major operational hub for brutal, localized cyber scam operations.
Do you see what the author of the text is doing here?
Laying out the baseline?
Exactly. By placing these very real, entirely verifiable human rights atrocities alongside claims of fringe technology, they are establishing a baseline. They are showing you that humanity is already entirely capable of engineering massive, complex systems of absolute control and suffering. From the physical control in a Salvadoran prison, to the informational starvation in North Korea, to the economic and psychological control in a Dubai scam compound, once you accept that reality, the leap to biological and technological control doesn't seem quite so impossible.
Right, and that is exactly where the text introduces the dark offshoots of science. It casually mentions organ sac technology for life extension.
Which is horrifying.
I mean, that sounds like dystopian biofarming for the ultra-rich. And then it gets into weaponry. The text discusses Delta microwave weapons allegedly used in Venezuela, which it explicitly connects to the Havana syndrome. And the most wild part, it claims this weaponry is actually reverse-engineered UFO technology.
Havana syndrome is a real, deeply concerning and documented medical anomaly that has affected hundreds of U.S. diplomats and intelligence officers worldwide.
What are the symptoms?
The patients report sudden, severe cognitive issues, vertigo, and a localized piercing sound in their heads. The mainstream intelligence and medical community has fiercely debated whether it is psychosomatic, some bizarre localized acoustic anomaly, or a targeted directed energy weapon.
How would a microwave weapon even cause a sound in someone's head?
Through a well-documented physical phenomenon called the Frey effect, or the microwave auditory effect.
Okay, how does that work?
If you pulse specific frequencies of microwave radiation at a human's skull, the radiation slightly heats the water tissue in the brain. This rapid, minute thermal expansion creates an acoustic pressure wave inside the skull. The wave travels through the bone and hits the inner ear from the inside.
Wow, from the inside.
Yes. The victim hears a screeching sound that no one else in the room can hear, and the physical pressure damages the delicate neural pathways.
That is terrifying.
It is. The sources definitively claim this is a global covert weapons program derived from non-human intelligence. It even details a specific narrative about a scientist who was allegedly targeted and tortured by these exact microwave weapons, specifically as retaliation for publishing an anti-gravity paper.
Which implies that the knowledge of physics is being suppressed through literal torture.
Exactly. It highlights a profound systemic paranoia about institutions. The underlying narrative is that the deep state, or the shadow government, will utilize unimaginable, invisible suffering to maintain its absolute monopoly on the true laws of physics and reality.
And the text goes even deeper. It moves from controlling the physical body to attempting to control consciousness itself. The sources introduce something called Project Aquarius. Now, listener, remember our disclaimer here, because we are wading into deeply sensitive theological territory.
Very sensitive.
The text claims that this classified project revealed that a prominent savior from 2,000 years ago was actually an alien biological seed placed on Earth.
It is directly taking fundamental human religious theology and brutally reframing it as an ancient, calculated extraterrestrial intervention project. It is the ultimate form of rewriting the human narrative.
Then there is Project Guardians of Destiny. The text describes this as an alleged NSA project involving genetically modified consciousness used to communicate telepathically with aliens. And it talks about a highly classified, 7-page redacted banned book concerning deep state armed forces, the true quantum nature of consciousness, and literally using the mind to summon UFOs into our airspace.
This aligns heavily with modern fringe protocols, often referred to in the community as CE5. Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind.
Right, Dr. Greer stuff.
Exactly. The operating theory here is that human consciousness is not a localized biological phenomenon trapped inside the meat of your brain. Instead, consciousness is a scalar field, a fundamental force of the universe, like gravity or electromagnetism.
And if it's a field?
If consciousness is a field, then a properly trained mind could theoretically interface with that field, bypass the limitations of space and time, and communicate directly with non-human technology.
And this entire massive document culminates in this ultimate mind-bending theory from an anonymous source. It claims that Earth is nothing more than a universe control group experiment. We were allegedly genetically and geographically separated from an incredibly advanced Eridanian civilization 10,000 years ago, and we are currently, unknowingly, hurtling toward a massive showdown in the year 2027 with a hostile race described as Ant-Men.
The 2027 date is a very persistent, pervasive meme in current UFO lore. It's often cited by various whistleblowers and fringe researchers as a hard deadline for catastrophic disclosure or some major, unavoidable cosmic event.
Okay, I have to stop and ask you this. This whole section reads like a cyberpunk thriller layered over a political spy novel. How do we reconcile the grim, tangible, verifiable realities of earthly prisons, gang wars, and global geopolitics with these massive comic book claims of scalar weapons, mind control, and a 2027 showdown with consciousness summoning Ant-Men?
We reconcile it by stepping back and looking at the psychology of secrecy, powerlessness, and the human condition.
Okay.
Think about the world we live in. We exist under systems of power, massive governments, military-industrial complexes, labyrinthine global financial systems, algorithms that control our data that operate almost entirely in the shadows. We feel their effects every day, but we cannot see the mechanics. They create a massive void of transparency, and human imagination absolutely abhors a vacuum.
So you're saying because we can't see the real puppet masters, we invent them?
Exactly. When we are confronted with massive, complex systems that dictate our lives, but which we cannot understand or control, we fill that void with profound, intricate, hyper-complex narratives. Whether these specific claims of scalar weapons and Eridanian control groups are literal, physical truths, or whether they are modern mythology, they reveal a very real, very deep collective human anxiety.
An anxiety about what?
About control. We look at the very real systems of domination, the physical crushing of humanity in the prisons of El Salvador, the absolute censorship and starvation in North Korea, the untraceable, life-ruining scam networks in Dubai, and we feel fundamentally powerless. We feel like we are at the mercy of chaotic, cruel systems. The narrative that we are part of a cosmic control group experiment is paradoxically deeply comforting to the human psyche.
I'm sorry, how is an impending intergalactic war with Ant-Men comforting? That sounds terrifying.
Because it implies that the chaos has a structure. It implies there is a plan. Even if it is an alien malevolent plan, it means someone is at the steering wheel.
Oh, I see.
It is vastly easier for the human mind to accept that a secretive, hyper-advanced, interdimensional cabal is orchestrating our misery for a grand cosmic purpose, rather than accepting the terrifying reality that human suffering is often just the chaotic, random result of our own flawed, entirely human systems of power. The Ant-Men give the chaos a face.
Wow, that is incredibly profound. We invent the monsters to avoid looking in the mirror. Well, we have gone on an absolutely incredible journey today. We have mapped the very edges of the unknown. And if there is one final provocative thought to draw from these incredibly diverse sources, it is a concept mentioned near the very end of the text, the Genesis Project.
Yes, a very real theoretical project proposed by a team of German scientists. The premise is fascinating.
The idea is that human scientists are currently conceptualizing the idea of loading automated probes with resilient microbes and firing them at distant exoplanets. The goal is to trigger an artificial alien Cambrian explosion. We are literally planning to seed a barren rock with the foundational building blocks of life, hoping that in a few billion years, a thriving ecosystem and perhaps intelligence naturally evolves.
It is the ultimate act of biological imperialism or creation, depending on your perspective.
So the question I want to leave you, the listener, with today is this. If human scientists are sitting in laboratories right now, actively planning to seed empty planets with life, playing the role of the ultimate external architects, is it really so far-fetched to wonder if a few billion years ago, someone else's Genesis project was us? Are we the scientists, or are we just the microbes? Listen, thank you so much for taking this wild deep dive with us today. Navigating these murky waters with you was absolutely fascinating. Until next time, stay curious.